Welcome to Race Insights from HP3, where we break down races with our coaching team so you know exactly what to expect and how to train for it. Today, we're talking about the Centurion's South Downs Way 50 miler with Coach Lewis, who knows this course inside and out. So, Lewis, let's start with the basics. Can you tell me a little bit more about what this race is and why this one is memorable for you?
Sure. So the South Downs Way 50 is a Centurion running race. It's been going for a long time. I don't know the year it started, but
it's the kind 13 years now.
13 years. There you go.
Something.
So it's the kind of sister race to the South Downs Way 100, which is held a little later in the summer. And this is basically the second half of that course. So it's 50 miles along the South Downs Way, believe it or not. And it clocks up about 1,800 meters of climb, or 6,000 feet roughly. And it's a beautiful course. The path and the trail is amazing. It starts sort of just north of Worthing and then it ends in Eastbourne, so it kind of not on the coast, but it stays fairly close to the south coast of England. And yeah, it's special to me because I won it back in 2022, I think, or 23. God, it's so far away now. 23. Yes, 2 years ago I won the race. And I had a really good day out there, but also faced some challenges, which we'll dive into a little bit in the chat. But yeah, a great race. I really enjoyed it. I'm hoping to go back and do the 100 at some point. But yeah.
Good stuff. So yeah, you mentioned the elevation and the trail there. So is this one a kind of sort of fast runnable trail? There's always this sort of debate regarding what kind of footwear to use for a trail race such as this. You know, can you even get away with road shoes on a trail race like this? So yeah, tell me a bit more about what the terrain's like underfoot.
Yeah, so I think that question, as always, I guess with trails, depends on the weather leading up to the race. For example, in my year, it was super dry. There were some people in road shoes, I think, from memory. I didn't. I wore trail shoes, but I do wish I'd have worn something with a little bit more cushioning because it is super runnable. Even with the nearly 2,000 meters of climbing, it's that the hills are fairly low gradient, I would say. It's not particularly technical. There are a few sections that are a little bit rocky, I guess, but really in the grand scheme of things, it's very runnable. When it's dry, like the year we had it, it's very hard packed, which can be challenging for your feet, especially if you're not in the right shoes and you are running quite hard. But I know some other years when it has been wet, it's that kind of chalky trail a lot of the time, and it can get a little bit sort of sticky and muddy and slippy in places. But I think given the nature it is mostly chalk, I think generally, unless it's bad weather in the weeks leading up to it, it's a pretty dry, runnable trail.
Yeah, and as we're recording this in 2025, the weather has been pretty dry for several weeks down there. So unless we get a massive change next week, then it's probably going to be quite a dry, hard, fast course, isn't it?
I imagine so, yeah. Because even if it rains now, I think it's going to just go through. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any sort of particular climbs or particular descents then that need to be thought about?
Yes. So for me, this race is really in two halves. Well, actually, no, let's break it into three. So you've got the first section, which starts just north of Worthing. And then I think one of the first big stations is at Botolphs. I'm probably butchering that name. But that's about 18 kilometers in, about 11 miles, I guess, into the race. The reason why I break up that first section is because it's a quick start. It's an uphill start, but it's quick. And especially if the weather's good, you're starting at 8 o'clock in the morning, so it's a nice start time. And there's two pretty significant climbs in that first 10 kilometers, which people will kind of go up pretty hard. And then that's followed by a big long descent down into Bottovs. Okay, so that I think this is where you'll try and find your rhythm in the race, is in those first couple of climbs and the big first descent. I say big, each climb's kind of 100 meters, and then the descent's 200, I think. So that's the kind of a first section where you don't want to go out too hard and really kind of start trashing your legs, with a significant portion of the race to go. Then from Bottovs to about halfway, at the farm, which name I've forgotten, Housedene Farm, is it halfway? Yeah, Housedene Farm.
Yeah.
All of that is pretty runnable. There's a big hill out of Bottovs, but other than that, it's quite flat and rolling. You're right on top of the downs, and it's runnable trail, wide trail. So even though it can be busy with people, you don't lose momentum in that. So be prepared to run for a lot of that section, which again could hurt things in the second half, as they did for me, when the elevation does pick up again. So you go through Housedene Farm, and then for the remaining, let's say the remaining marathon, remaining kind of 40k, or 25 miles, there's the big hills start coming back again. So you've got a big hill out of Housedene Farm, which drags from memory. And then at South Sea, I think it is, at around kind of 55 kilometers. And then again at 65 kilometers, you've got these kind of 200-meter climbs, which are pretty steep, and they do go on quite a bit. So it's important, I think, in that second half to just remember that they're coming, because I think if you're trashed and cramping like I was at that stage, then you can lose a lot of time. And I was always looking over my shoulder at that point, waiting for second to catch me up. So yeah, those are the three sections I'd break it into, really. A quick but lumpy start, and then a very runnable sort of second quarter, if you like, and then the second half is much more hilly again, and a bit slower.
So on the topic of those hills then, obviously when you raced it, you were at the front of the field. But for those maybe in the middle of the back of the pack, are those hills ones that they could consider using poles for? Would you say that's worth taking for some people, or are those hills really not steep enough to warrant using poles?
Personally, I wouldn't see the value in poles, but it depends. It depends how reliant a person is on poles. I think, if it does bring a lot of comfort knowing you've got poles there, or it's a habitual thing, then they're certainly big enough to warrant it, I think, if that's you. But I think in the grand scheme of things, these hills are never particularly that steep, and although they can drag on a bit because they're not that steep, they're over fairly quick, and so I think you'd be getting your poles in and out quite a lot. And then once you're on the tops, there's really no need for them, because it's just very rolling, wide, easy trail. So personally, I'd say no, but as always with these things, if it's what you prefer and you feel more comfortable with them than without, then by all means.
And it'd be a case of, as you say, because the hills are quite short, then being very, very practiced in getting your poles out and putting them away again, and not losing lots of time around that. Yeah. So are there any sort of key navigation concerns with this course? How well marked is it?
Super well marked. So Centurion, running some of the best organized events in the country. I think from memory, they rely on the South Downs Way acorn for quite a lot of the race, and that's fine because that's really well marked. But from memory, there are some helpful bits of marking where it does get tricky. I think there are a couple of points where you have to be a little bit careful, particularly one at the end where you kind of come over the last hill, and I think there's like a few different options of trail, and if you choose the wrong one, you're going down a steep hill and you're going down it the wrong way, which is not ideal. So I think they go into a lot of detail on the website, so I'd recommend people look at the course notes, particularly for like where they sort of advise. It's a bit trickier, but also I think on the day that I ran it, there was someone at the top of that hill anyway helping.
Yeah.
So yeah, navigation is not something to stress about with this race,
Cool.
providing you kind of familiarize yourself a little bit with the course notes page.
That's it. Yeah, and there's quite a few videos out there where people have shown exactly that, like you say, that last drop off from the trig point at the end.
Yeah.
They've actually got one where one of their guys has ridden it on the mountain bike and shown exactly the way to the finish. So let's think about the logistics of this race. With it being a point to point, is there anything that people need to think about in terms of their travel and accommodation, or anything that we could catch people out?
Yeah, so as you say, the finish is 50 miles away because it is not only point to point, it's a pretty straight line as well. So you're quite far from the start when you do finish. So I was very lucky. I got dropped off and picked up, and that took a lot of the stress out of it. So if you were lucky enough to have that, then great. But I believe there is a bus that takes people from the finish to the start, which you can purchase online ahead of the race. And that, would be very handy because I think the finish is sort of in Eastbourne, where there is a train station not far away. Whereas the start is a bit of a walk up from Worthing station. But worst case scenario, if you are stuck, there is a train line that runs all along that south coast between the two. So you're never that far from civilization. Even if you have to get taxis here and there, it's fine. But just as always, bear in mind that it's quite an early start, 8 o'clock in the morning. If you're not getting the organized bus, then make sure that you're there in plenty of time, and making sure you're not rushing right before the start of the race.
Yeah, that's it. Is always make sure you're there. I always say try to get to the start sort of 2 hours before, so that if you end up running late, you've still got plenty of time and you're not rushing around and getting stressed. So then what about race day support? You mentioned obviously Centurion's a really well organized company, and their support crews or the aid station crews are really good. So yeah, tell me a bit more about the aid stations. Are you allowed crew on this race? I don't think we're not allowed any support crews or support runners on a race like this, but what about the aid stations? Are there any kind of memorable ones for you?
Yeah, so you're not allowed crew on this race, just to clarify that. So it is all down to what you take and then the aid stations. But luckily the aid stations are pretty incredible. From memory, the kind of first couple are a little sort of light, as you might expect anyway. But then when you get to Housestein Farm, that's really well established aid station halfway. And then from what I remember, I think every aid station for that point onwards is pretty stacked. And there's tons of volunteers. I think I remember something like 100 volunteers being on it when I ran, which for a 50-mile race is more than enough. Really good community. Everyone's super friendly and chatty, as you would expect. So yeah, no, I don't think the lack of crew is a problem. I think there's more than enough to get through the race with just the aid stations. I believe they've now signed up or signed a partnership with Precision Fuel and Hydration, so which is my choice of nutrition. So so I think if people want to rely on the aid stations, it'd be good to familiarize yourself with Precision's products ahead of time. But that gives you the options of drink mixes, of gels, with caffeine or without. They've got these tasty chews and everything. So more than enough needed to get through this.
I heard that they're not using the caffeine gels. They just got the standard 30-gram gels and the standard chews, and then it's the 1,000-milligram electrolyte drink. So, but with those, absolutely fine. I'll be carrying a few caffeine gels myself because I like a bit of caffeine. But otherwise, be able to pick up from the aid stations. And then they've also got their tailwind as well. So they've still got their tailwind sponsor for those who want that.
Got it. Right. Okay.
So cool. Okay. So in terms of, obviously you've raced this yourself, obviously successfully, having won it. But if you were then coaching somebody for this race, what are maybe some of the key demands that you'd want to be preparing them for?
Yeah, good question. So as we discussed before, it's pretty runnable, this race. So there is some hiking, I think, for people going up the hills. Perhaps the front runners won't hike at all during the entire race. I doubt Tom Evans did when he set the set the course record. And I think from memory, I only started hiking in the second half of the race, but because I ran the first half way too quickly. So there's a few things that I would be preparing in a training block before. A lot of that being sort of longer tempo and threshold efforts. So not too many kind of really sort of I guess short, sharp efforts, but I'd be focusing more on that longer runnable workout style. At the same time, the hills are where this race could be made or broken for someone. So I'd be getting on the treadmill and sort of at between 5 and 10%, doing some sort of longer efforts at that gradient. Just you're super comfortable jogging or walking up at that gradient for 10, 15 minutes. And then I think as well, just kind of making sure you're getting that volume in, because as we said before, it is a long race. It's 50 miles, 80 kilometers. People will be out there for a long time. And so making sure you've prepared for that time on feet, and particularly at a kind of, more runnable pace as well, I think would be super important. So in terms of running training, that's what I would be focusing on. The second area I think that is really important for this race is nutrition. So I would be practicing a lot with nutrition. You want to be still moving well in that second half. So really kind of making sure you're taking on plenty of carbs throughout, and also hydrating with electrolytes too, because the reason why I say that is if the weather's warm, which it can often be in April, down in the South Downs, as we're seeing right now, and it's a super runnable, hard packed trail, it's a big recipe for cramp. And so I think people should be practicing with their electrolytes, making sure they're taking on plenty throughout that first half, even if they feel like they don't need it, so that when they get to that tough second half of the race, that they are not wincing with cramp like I was on many occasions. So those would be the big focus areas for me to make sure that they have a successful day.
Yeah, and I think you said there that even you were hiking those hills in the second half. So I think that's an important thing to get across is even people at the very front of the race, people who are winning the race, are still hiking some of those hills. So those in the middle of the back of the pack, should certainly not be feeling bad about hiking any of those hills, and realizing that actually by doing that you're pacing it more sensibly, and even doing that from the the get-go, those first hills, don't feel bad about hiking those first hills.
Definitely, yeah. That's one of the reasons why I had a tough second half, was because I ran so much in the first, because I ran all the hills in the first. I paid a heavy price, and there's, but I could have had a much more even effort if I'd have paced it better in that first half. So, yeah.
So then, thinking about those who maybe have done this before and are wanting to maybe push themselves and go a little bit faster, is there anything that you would say that they need to particularly focus on? I think you might be sort of touched on that already in terms of the pacing, the nutrition, hydration. Is there anything else you would add to that in terms of somebody who's wanting to try and push to the next level and go that little bit faster?
It's a tough question, because I think it really depends on what went well or didn't go so well in the first effort or the first attempt. But I think knowing the course will be an advantage. So you'll naturally have that anyway, just knowing what hills are coming and when, and being able to pace accordingly for that. I would look at everything regarding shoe choice and kit. did you take a bit too much kit last time? Obviously, you need the mandatory kit, but like for example, poles, like did you take poles and that maybe weighed you down a little bit and you didn't really use them that much? So I'd be looking to try and get as light as possible as you can while still meeting the mandatory requirements. And then, yeah, really, I think fuel and hydration is a big part of this race in particular. Obviously, particularly with the weather, if it is warm. So getting that right is key. And then, yeah, after that, I think it all comes down to your ability to move over the hills as quickly and as smoothly as possible without working too hard. So, in the training, I'd focus so much on just being comfortable running up at 5-8% uphill for 10-15 minutes.
Isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that should be the focus. And I think that's where probably a lot of time is lost for people, is by either going up those hills too hard and then paying for it later, or not being fit or conditioned enough to go up those hills as quick as they could.
Very good. Excellent. Okay, well, thank you very much, Lewis. Thank you for watching as well. So hopefully this little chat has been useful. So if you're training for this event or want to know more, you can check out the links below, where we're going to have more race breakdowns on our channel. So please subscribe to stay up to date. Thank you very much.
Thanks.